Hey guys, Jim Remo here with eRealEstateCoach podcast. I'm super excited. We have got Mr. Ed Matthews here from Clark Street Capital. So this is going to be a really fascinating conversation. I'm an investor. I, invest in residential real estate, some RV parks, and some commercial stuff. But Ed comes to us as a active investor. His full-time gig is real estate investing, and this is going to be fascinating because he's going to share with us some ideas on what he looks for from realtors, but also what realtors can do to talk to people like Ed. So I think this is fascinating. Ed, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Jim.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about your background so the audience kind of gets to know you.
I am a recovering Silicon Valley executive. I spent better part of 24 years flying all over the world, slinging software and services.
Love it.
And in 2018, I went full time. I founded Clark Street Capital in 2011 and went full time in 2018, and have been doing that ever since.
Nice. And are you still in Silicon Valley? Have you moved to other areas?
No, I live in Connecticut now, and I
Oh,
always lived in Connecticut or in the Northeast. And my problem with Silicon Valley wasn't the job. It's a phenomenal job, and I worked with some amazing people and some amazing customers. My problem was I spent 150 nights a year flying all over the world slinging software. And so I have a beautiful wife and two amazing daughters, and I didn't get to see them anywhere near as much as I wanted to. So
gotcha.
uh, real estate kind of set me free.
Got it. Well, let's talk about the investing side of the business now. So kind of fill us in on what you do today and your recommendations for agents.
So primarily, I'm a multifamily investor, buy and hold. As I jokingly tell people, I buy crappy apartment buildings from landlords who aren't very good at their jobs. And our job is to make them clean and safe, and then ultimately upgrade them to the point where folks are really proud to live there and stay a really long time, hopefully. And so an investor like me, a value add investor, is always looking at deals in terms of kind of two major things to start. One is when we've zeroed in on our market, that is. One is physical occupancy, how many humans live in the building,
Sure.
and two, economic occupancy, how many people are actually paying of those that live in the building. And sometimes that number is not 100%, right?
Sure.
And so typically when I'm working with the brokers that I work here in Connecticut in my markets, um, we've gotten very clear. So I've been doing this a while, and we've gotten very clear about, the type of building that we're looking for. And so, in fact, I know there are 1,208 buildings in the state of Connecticut that someday I'd like to own. And I don't aspire to own all of them because that would be a headache, but a small percentage would be nice.
Yeah.
And so, we got very clear when we were doing that market research. We got very clear about exactly what our buy box looks like in terms of, what we like, what we tend to avoid. And so that way half a dozen, really two or three brokers that I count on to kind of feed us deals knows exactly what we're looking for so that I don't waste their time. In my days of sales and marketing and operations, I came to really understand very quickly that time was our most valuable asset, right? And especially when you're a full commissioned realtor or broker, you can't waste time on folks that are, just saying, well, just send me the good deals, right?
Right.
Uh, you know, I think it's incumbent upon us as investors to be very clear and be able to prescribe, here's exactly what I'm looking for. If you happen to come across this, I'm very interested. And then obviously you have to perform as an investor. You've got to be able to, put that under contract and actually follow through and close, right?
Yeah. Would you consider yourself an institutional level investor, or are you,
Uh,
what would you consider yourself?
just a regular guy who buys crappy apartment buildings.
Okay. So you're working with, as you described, two or three agents, I'm assuming in different market areas in your states.
Right.
I'm very curious how you selected those specific agents. Did they approach you? Did you approach them? Did you just network and meet them? I mean, how did that happen?
So one of them's a very close friend of mine,
Yeah.
and I loved her before I knew that she was a realtor. She's my one of her and her husband are my wife's and my almost probably the closest friends we have. Um, and so it just happened that we happened to be in the same business at one point, and we've been working together ever since.
Gotcha.
The second one, I approached a friend of mine at the one of the one of the larger brokerages, and it turns out that they had assigned a different broker to my account a few weeks prior, and so I met her, and she's been amazing, and Maddie Cerruti, and she's she just sold my oldest property about a week ago. Thank you, Maddie, wherever you are. Um, and then the other one, I specifically went and introduced myself and bought her a cup of coffee and figured out if we could work together. And, a lot of the times, almost always, I mean, it's a person to person business, right? And so I like to work with people I like.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that they like to work with people they like. And so I'm looking for that in terms of, do I want to have a cup of coffee with this person? Are they smart? Do they teach me things when I sit down with them, or when we've got to get stuff done, do they get stuff done? Right. And by and large, those are the people I tend to do business with, because time is my most valuable asset as well. Right. There's only
Yeah.
so many hours in the day. I am a human being. I do require sleep. And so that leaves me a finite amount of time to be able to go do deals.
Yeah, so let's talk about the working relationship you have with realtors, because I'm very curious, and
Yeah.
how this actually, because you're the best kind of client. You're a serial client, I call you. So you're a client that's going to buy and sell multiple properties over a period of time. So you're the best client possible we could have, right?
As one of them calls me, a sure thing.
A sure thing. That's right. So, and what does this look like? Are these agents going out and finding off-market deals, on-market deals? Are they coming in saying, "Hey, I've already done a rough pencil on this property and it's X cap rate, and I think it would be an attractive building," or are they just shoveling it all to you and you do the analysis? How does it work?
Uh, a little bit of both.
Sure.
So some of them are, hey, this is too much for me. I don't know what to do with it. Is this anything you'd be interested in? So there's occasionally that.
Sure.
Most of them I've sat with and said, okay, here's the math. Here's what I look for, right? I'm looking for NOI. I'm looking for rent roll, take 50% of that. That's the NOI, divide by the local cap rate, which these days is probably in the 7 to 8%, depending on the city. And minus and plus and minus 10%, that's probably the range that I'm looking for, right? And if a seller is realistic in that range, I'm a buyer. And if they are crazy over that, which is pervasive these days, lots of euphoria, I would say.
Mhm.
I'm still interested, but it's going to take some creativity. And so where I think the folks that I tend to work with, there's a level of trust, so that if I go in and say, look, I can't take this to a bank and finance this at 70, 80% loan to value, because your price, it won't appraise, right?
Yeah.
However, what I can do is lower the risk of the bank if you're willing to do seller financing. And this is where the trust comes in, where I know that the broker has a commission on the line. I'm not looking to go around them, nor am I looking to cut down on theirs. I just want the seller to be flexible in terms of conversation I had a few days ago, right? The seller was $500,000 more than the market would bear these days, but it's a really good building, right? And I said, look, if you're willing to, I said, that's a 2021 vintage price. If you're willing to give me 2021 terms, I can buy this building for you for the price
Oh,
you're asking,
that's a
right?
everybody should stop, pause, write that down. That was a great, like $1 million conversation right there. 2021 terms, 2021 price. Fantastic. Go ahead.
The broker standing next to me, virtually or otherwise, in this case, it was otherwise. She was standing next to me. She didn't balk, because she knows that regardless of this goes through bank financing or seller financing, her commission's getting paid,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
It's worth it for her to bring this deal to me, knowing that I've got her back, right? And so that also gives me some flexibility to get creative. And we're still talking. He didn't like the terms I offered. I'm happy to pay 3% interest only on a building that's grossly overpriced. Um, if you can, live with that for the first 5 to 7 years, and so far he can't. So, we're still talking,
Yeah.
but we'll see. But that's a perfect example, right? That was a seller who called the broker that I work with. Um, she called me and said, he's a good guy, but he's out of his mind in terms of what he wants for it. You got any ideas? And I said, let's go buy him a cup of coffee. Let's figure this out. Right. And so I listened and I did some quick math and explained to him where I was at from a cash flow perspective. He heard me. He understood my math. Totally rejected my offer, but at least there's a conversation, right? And
Conversations
so
lead to deals.
exactly. And you got to kiss a ton of frogs before you find your prince or princess, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Uh, the thing that um, that Allie had, the broker had told me was, look, we've got to figure this out because you're probably one of the few buyers in this state that will buy this, or at least the ones that she knows. And so the reason that I rely so heavily on brokers, it is the most efficient way from my perspective. I've done direct mail, I've done email marketing. I'm a digital marketing guy by trade. So, email, SEO, all that stuff. I've got it all flying everywhere all the time. Most efficient way to find a deal is to work with a broker whose only focus on a daily basis is creating relationships with the building owners I want to meet.
Mm.
Right. And so I'm more than happy to work with a broker. I'm more than happy to bring a broker into a deal if I'm trying to create a relationship, which I've done, early on. And as I break into new markets, mainly because I want to earn their trust
Yeah.
and then earn the right to do business with them over the course of time.
Mhm.
And so the, you know, either 2.5, 5, whatever points that I end up paying to do business with a broker with whom I want to do business with, it's a deposit in the future broker karma bank in the world, because at some point they're going to realize, okay, I'm a good guy, I do what I say I'm going to do,
Yeah.
and if I tell you I'm going to buy it, I put in a legit offer, and I'm also super responsive.
Let me ask you this, because this is interesting. And I know this is going to go through some people's heads, so I'm going to ask the question. Do you have an exclusive relationship with agents, or are you like, I work with agents that bring me the deal? How does it work for you?
I work with agents who bring me the deal.
Got it.
So if like within my days when I was flipping,
Yeah.
by and large, if someone brought me a deal, they would get the sale on the back end when we flipped it,
Sure.
right?
Yep.
If I buy a multifamily and hold it for 10 years,
Mhm.
if that person's still in my world, then yeah, they'd get the deal. But that isn't always the case.
Let's go back to you mentioned a term that some people will be foreign to, but I think it's really interesting, and we heard it a lot during the iBuyer rage, but that's kind of faded, which is the
Yeah.
buy box, right? So you
Right.
have a buy box that you defined, and for those agents that don't, like, what is a buy box? Let's define that for agents so that they clearly understand what you're talking about there. And I think it's a really good conversation for agents to have with their investors about what is their buy box. So can you explain that?
In fact, if I were a broker and I wasn't standing before or talking with an investor who could give you this information, I would move on, because this person's is going to be a time suck
Yeah.
until they figure out that this is what they need to do, and most of them do, or at least the good ones. So my buy box is I buy Class C and C plus, B minus properties in secondary and tertiary towns in the state of Connecticut. So I buy the one-off towns around the 5 or 6 cities here in the state. I'm looking for minimum 6 units, preferably 25 plus. There aren't a lot of those in this state that come up for sale. So, most of the ones that we own are in that 8 to 16, maybe 18 unit space.
Sure.
I stay out of the cities. And, in terms of economic occupancy and physical occupancy, uh, I tend to focus on economic occupancy. If it's above 65%, I'm interested. I want pitched roofs, not flat roofs. I want utilities that are broken out by unit so that I'm not paying the heating bill, because it gets cold here and oil is really expensive. I'm looking for properties that, are not functionally obsolete, where, apartments, you have to walk through the kitchen to get to a bedroom, to get to the bathroom, to, things like that. I tend to avoid those things. I'm okay with construction. I'm okay with structural issues. I'm okay with uh, common area and unit level rehabs, and that can be complete guts,
Mhm.
as long as the seller understands the difference between zhuzhing a place up and totally gutting it.
Yeah.
Uh, One costs 3 to 6 thousand, the other one can cost 25,000 per unit, right? So as long as the seller understands the difference, we're gonna be able to figure something out.
Let's help agents understand the difference between quickly the A, B, C, because this is something you hear a lot in commercial and investment property.
Right. So A-class building is a relatively new building, probably in the last 10 years. Well appointed, typically has a lot of common area amenities, on-site laundry, or better still, laundry hookups in the units. May have a gym, has a common area, has a nice lobby, well appointed, well lit, parking. A lot of them have covered parking. But Class A tends to be newer buildings, within 10 years. Uh, the next layer is B. B buildings tend to be what used to be A buildings 11 years ago plus, and maybe a little bit more in terms of repair maintenance costs, because buildings age, especially because of humans. We tend to break stuff, so
Yep.
over the course of time, the repair and maintenance tends to be a little higher. They tend to be like 80s to, here in Connecticut, a B class building would be 80s to, let's call it, early 2000s. And then Class C tends to be uh, good working class neighborhoods, and the range of those. I mean, our oldest one is built in 1850. The newest one, I think, is probably in the 1950s, but tend to be late 70s and older, in working class neighborhoods. And then Class D tends to be the places you don't want to go, war zones.
Got it. Got it. Okay, very good. I interrupted your buy box conversation, but that was kind of where we're going. Is they've had clearly defined what they are looking for, and they have a very clear vision of that. Do you put a price tag on that as well? Do you say I'm in the 500 to 5 million price tag, or do you do that?
I do. I tend to think about it in terms of units, but it's basically the same. It's two sides of the same coin, right? Because units here in Connecticut trade right around 100 grand.
Yeah,
So, if I'm looking for a $500,000 building, it's probably a 5 or 6 unit building.
got it. Okay. When you're talking about buy and hold rather than flipping,
Yep.
what's your trigger point for selling? I'm very curious about that because this is interesting when we're targeting potential listings as an agent. What for you
Yeah.
would be a trigger point?
So, uh, first and foremost, every single property we own today is for sale. It may not be listed, but if somebody comes in and gives me the number that I'm looking for that property, it's theirs, right? Um, I just sold the first building I ever bought. Maddie Cerruti sold it, as a matter of fact. And that I bought in February of 2011, and I had a number on it on my head that if I ever got an offer over 400 grand for it, I bought it for $99,000.
Got it.
If I ever got it for an offer for over 400 grand, I'd sell it. Gentleman came along and offered me 410, and I sold it.
Nice.
So now I'm taking that money and 1031 exchanging into a much larger building. And so I'm converting that 4 units into a 12 unit somewhere in North Carolina. I'm hunting for an 8 to 12 unit down there right now, as a matter of fact,
Nice.
feverishly, because I'm on the clock.
I'm curious because I'm also an active investor, and I'm wondering because I find that there has to be, you're surrounded by a team, and agents are part of that team, but you also have a
Yep.
lender generally, and some other people that are part of the team. Who else is a part of your team that makes up your kind of investing world? Just curious.
So real estate attorney,
Yep.
bookkeeper, CPA,
Yep.
uh, handyman, plumber, electrician, HVAC, general contractor for the bigger stuff.
Yep.
Uh, let's see. Those are the primary ones
Mm.
that off the top of my head.
Yep.
Basically, I'm looking for, so I work with, 3+ brokers. I have one attorney, I have one CPA, I have one bookkeeper. Um, we have a handyman there is overlap across buildings, but only if it makes sense.
Mhm.
Typically we'll deploy a handyman, plumber, electrician, HVAC person at each one of the buildings in terms of they're contractors. They don't work for us,
Sure.
but they're on call when stuff breaks,
Yeah.
and oil company, things like that, right? And so um, I'm looking to have individuals assigned so that A, they start to get to know the building, right?
Sure.
And B, it is clear within our property management system. We use a tool called Hemlane. When something breaks at Willington, we know to call Loy Winter. When something breaks at, 1115 Clark Street, we call Tom Kopchik, right? And it's easy.
Got it. Interesting. So let me ask you this. So let's assume that a broker calls you cold and says, hey Ed, I have a property that is X, Y, and Z. If it falls in your buy box, you're totally willing to talk to him. And this is where I think that's what I'm hearing from you. I think this is where agents have so much fear in calling an investor like you because they perceive, oh, this guy's a multimillionaire. He's going to be very intimidating. He's not going to want to talk to me. But yeah, I'm hearing that's not true. Correct?
I don't think I'm that scary.
You're not that intimidating, right?
Uh, and unless you're a boy trying to date one of my daughters, then I'm pretty
Watch out.
scary. I'm 6'4" and I probably outweigh him by an eighth grader. So that comes in handy. But when it comes to brokers, I'm happy to talk. And
Good.
the thing is that if somebody calls me, and it happens occasionally, somebody calls me and says, "Hey, I got a deal, and I'm not really sure what to do with it, or is this something you'd be interested in?" I'm doing a quick back of the envelope calculation either while I'm sitting there on the phone or immediately after I get the lead
Yeah.
and getting back to them and saying, "Hey, I'm probably in the ballpark of X between X and Y on this property. Am I in the ballpark or am
Yeah.
I totally all wet?" And so at least they know this is, ballpark what I'm looking at. And if I'm in the game, great, let's engage. If I'm not, that's cool too. Keep me in mind for the next one.
It's educational for them because they're learning from an investor how you're looking at it. I think it's great.
It's math.
Yeah.
That's it.
I'm curious for you personally, because I'm a strong believer in working with community banks because you can do portfolio work. Is that kind of where you're at? Are you doing community banks or are you getting private investment money and that kind of thing?
A little bit of both.
Yeah.
So I have done one syndication. I probably wouldn't do it again, mainly because it's fairly complex and unnecessary unless it's an institutional level deal.
Good deal.
Um, I tend to lean towards joint ventures and community banks. So we have our own private equity fund, so we use that to kind of take the deals down,
Mhm.
and then so that's raised from private lenders, private investors who have invested in the fund, and then we turn around and go buy stuff.
Sure.
And then we pay a higher interest rate, which is how everybody makes money.
Right.
And then that debt typically lasts 6 to 12 months is usually the timeline on it.
Hmm.
We use that debt to buy the property and fix it as
Hmm.
best, as much as we can within that 12. And then we refi into a portfolio lender like you were talking about and tend to hold it for, the intent is to hold it forever. So
Right.
uh, and then, at some point, we either as a team decide to sell it or we keep it,
Mhm.
or we refinance it and return capital to the other partners, and Clark Street keeps it. It can be a lot of different things, but those are the basic deal structures.
And so when you're talking about for you personally, I'm curious in terms of how this is all going to be different for every investor, but you personally are looking at how big a berth for buying property. Are you, 20 square miles, your entire state? What does it look like for you? I'm curious.
Well, fortunately, Connecticut's small,
Yeah,
and I live
it's not a big
right,
state. Yeah, that's true.
right, no traffic. I can drive to Fairfield County in an hour, and I can drive to Rhode Island in an hour. So, and
Right.
Springfield, Massachusetts in an hour, and I can, get to the
But
beach,
but
look
it's
at Long
interesting
Island.
because being in New England, where you're at, I mean, you could easily just cross the border and buy something in another state. And is that something you're doing?
No, we
Yeah.
don't. I have. I bought in Vermont. We had a whole bunch of units up there, and then decided we bought really, really well, and the market just went nuts. And we thought, you know what? Let's take the win. And so we ended up selling all those and buying stuff down here instead.
Gotcha.
I tend to hold on to. I tend to buy properties that I can touch within an hour. So, within so the rule in our property management shop is in our team on our team here is blood, flood, or fire. I get a phone call immediately, right? Call the
Mhm.
authorities and call me. And so the stuff happens, right?
Yeah.
We had a main sewer break, a couple months ago, and I needed to be on site, and I was on site in 45 minutes, right? And so, um, unfortunately, it was fixed 24 hours later. Thank God. But the whole idea of this is I want to be able to be on site in a relatively short period of time, just in case, right?
Yeah.
So if there's a fire, God forbid, and the police captain's going, "Who's the owner?" and I'm right here, sir,
Yeah.
right? And as opposed to them trying to have to find me or me have to get on a plane and come, which we're progressing towards. We're looking at out of state stuff right now, but
Mhm.
um,
I've always been the same way. I feel like if I can't drive by it, then I feel uncomfortable with it. But
well,
it's
and it's a great way to spend a Friday afternoon, right? Is
right,
to go around and make sure that your buildings are still there. It's
right,
fun.
right. Any condition and what's going on? Now, so I have one more question, and then we'll let you go. But I'm curious. You're doing all your in-house property management. You do, or you haven't farmed that out. You do it inside. You do it internally.
Yeah, we had farmed it out and then brought it in probably a couple of years ago, right at the end of COVID.
Got it.
Um, and the reason being is that we have we're very specific about what we want when we acquire a building. We go in. The mantra is when we buy a building, it's make it clean and safe, then upgrade it, make it beautiful. Because the idea here, our business model is entirely focused on tenancy. And so the average tenancy here in the state of Connecticut, last time I checked, I think it was like 17, 18 months. So that means everybody's moving pretty much every other year,
Yeah.
right?
Wow.
And with every move, there is a lease up, there is painting and upgrades and all the things that we have to do, which is, that costs money.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if a resident is living in an apartment that they are proud to live in, it's well appointed, it's current in terms of repair and all that, and they're proud to live there, they're going to stay a lot longer. And so our residents, on average, I think our residents stay just over 4 years. Last time we checked, I think was like 4.1, 4.2 years.
You're
And
doubling.
so that allows our buildings to be a lot more profitable because
Yeah.
I don't have to pay for turns and lease ups.
Wow.
And or we're doing that, but we're doing it every 4 years instead of every two.
Sure.
Um, and so that is something that we're particularly focused on.
Love it. Ed, you've just given us a ton of great information and some real nuggets there. If somebody wants to learn more about you, what you're doing, what you're all about, what should they do?
Best way to reach me is to either go to our website, clarkst.com, clarkstreet.com.
Okay.
You can hop on our own podcast, The Real Estate Underground, and listen to that and leave a comment, and we pay attention. And if I don't call you, a member of my team will.
Nice.
And I'm on social media everywhere. So I'm Ed Matthews with 1T, 4. So Ed Matthews 4, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, you name it. I'm not on TikTok yet because my kids are terrified of seeing me. I have a 21-year-old and a 16-year-old, and they're absolutely terrified of seeing me lip syncing to some song. So I've held off on that, but that's probably coming too.
I love it. Thank you so much, Ed, for all the information. If you enjoyed this podcast, please give us a 5-star rating. We'd love to get your rating out there. As Ed said on our podcast, if you make a comment, we'd love to see that too, and we'll respond to all comments. And always subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet. Thank you so much, and we'll see you again soon.